Oh, get off. Get out of here.
Double down, lug nut. Welcome to the Fo0H Tribe, bitches. Yay! Episode 37. Last week, yesterday, Sunday, we had the first week of the NFL season, and my Giants look terrible. But we're moving on from that because I'll get too depressed. Welcome to the Fo0H Tribe Podcast, friends, where men can be men and butch can be butch. I swear to you, where butch can be butch. So this episode, we're going to stage one of In Between Men, and it's very different. It's very different for a lot of reasons. I won't say that it's somber, but it's troubling, to say the least. So I hope that you will sit back and relax. I have a Yeti tumbler full of ice and filtered Brita water, which is tasty. Even though it's not really tasty, it's just tasty. So do me a favor, do yourself a favor. I'll see you in there. All right, sports fans, we're here. We're here on a Monday. Have I told you how much I've enjoyed doing this? I just feel like I just need to take 1 second and just simply air out the fact that, yes, we're talking about compelling things with men and what's happening and defining stages and doing all that stuff, but I have attacked this in a way like I've never attacked anything before. I just feel like there's a real value and purpose to what we're doing here, and I'm excited about it. And I think what I'm most excited about is that I don't really know where it's going. You know, I've accepted that some aspects of what we've talked about in previous episodes, some of those definitions might change, but like, I don't know, like, I can't say that I know that I've ever been on the right path before, so I have nothing to really reference it from, but this feels right. I don't know. I just wanted to say that. All right, so today we're talking about stage number one of In Between Men. And if you've been listening to the podcast and the last couple episodes, we have gone over this definition many different times in many different episodes. But let me just read it to you again because we're on this stage and it applies. So overtime, it's overtime. Not like work overtime, but just overtime. In between men gradually accept one or more aspects of the traditional male value system does lack emotional and or spiritual substance. Men in this stage deny and reject the notion that any emotional and or spiritual growth applies to them. Okay? So this will also be the first time that I pull out one aspect that's been listed in articles or studies that speaks to one of the aspects of our traditional male value system. And I'm picking out the one that is most relevant to this stage. So, since one or more aspects of the traditional male value system promotes emotional stoicism from an early age, men have not been taught and have never learned the negative impact not feeling their emotions will impact them. Being tough when dealing with emotions can yield very negative results for anyone. Anyone, men, women, various different gender identities, whatever you want to do. All right. So I'm going to take a second just to sort of share with you the typical definitions that are applied to being emotionally stoic. So emotionally stoic is defined, it's being indifferent, that helps, to pleasure or pain and not showing your feelings. All right, I looked up these definitions on Google. So indifferent, I just need to know what that definition is having no particular interest or sympathy. You're unconcerned, neither good or bad, it's mediocre. So you're unconcerned about how you may feel about being sexually abused. I would think that you would probably want to talk about that if you know that it's bad. But my point is that men have been taught for such a long time, since they were early boys, not to talk about this stuff, not to have emotions. Jesus, son, stop crying. Don't show the other team that they got to you. Tough it up. Fucking don't be a pussy, right? And so in further definition, what does stoic mean? Is someone who is not very emotional. The hell does that even mean? How do you be not very emotional versus being extremely emotional? Can you just see how the definitions are just so out of whack, and how easy it is to say, I don't want you to feel that, son. It's bad. That's not what Clint Eastwood would do. Are you trying to tell me that Harry Callahan would go home and talk to his wife? Well, he wasn't married, but talk to his partner about how he's feeling about shooting someone in the face? I don't think so. Harry Callahan's tough. He's a fucking enforcer. I'm kidding, of course, but I want to get my point across. I mean, do you think in The Good and the Bad and the Ugly that Clint Eastwood would need to go see a therapist after shooting countless people? I don't think so. So let me just give you a couple simple examples of where I think this stuff lies. And I kind of pointed it out before with the Clint Eastwood stuff. But men are not taught at an early age that it's okay to cry. Listen, guys, you already fucking know this, okay? You do. Because you're saying to yourself, I already know this, Rennick. They are told that they need to be tough. Most men hide and repress their emotions, reinforcing the idea that showing sadness or pain through tears or oral communication is 100% manly. Listen, guys, I'm not afraid to cry in front of anyone. And what I've learned is that because I'm a man and because I'm not supposed to cry, that when I do cry, I actually get more support, depending on who it is. Let's just assume that I'm working with a therapist. Let's just assume that I'm, working with a mentor, right? Like, crying is a fact of life. The Terminator doesn't cry. I mean, they didn't build tears into the T-2000. So what happens is, in between men in this stage have gradually accepted this isn't true and that they may actually believe it. So I can, just stay with me for a second, I can, in my mind, say to you, I can accept that, right? I can accept that being emotionally stoic is a benefit, is not a benefit to me, and that I should be able to talk about my emotions. Okay? But men that are in this stage and are in between men deny it. Deny it until they can't deny it anymore. So waking up to this reality in their mind, not in their heart, that they have accepted that it's okay to be emotional, they further reject it. And then what ends up happening to them is that throughout any of the stages, if they've been angry or hyper irritable or depressed, it elevates. They become super angry. They become hyper irritable. They become overly depressed, and they isolate even more. And it makes sense because that's how I would respond when I have to deal with tough emotions. I usually get angry. Why the fuck do I have to go through this? Right? I'm gonna fucking do something crazy. And it usually involves hurting myself, emotionally and or physically. So the fact that these men who know over the course of growing up and in these various different stages have to even consider unboxing any emotionally repressed personal experiences that they've had. Okay? And let's just call a spade a spade. Usually it's very common that men, like women, have had traumatic things happen to them at an early age. Okay? It's not always the case, but for men, it further reinforces their fact that they need to stuff this stuff. Keep pushing it down. Like, men are built with the trash compactor, right? When the trash heap gets full, we compact it down so we get more room to put more shit in there and just compact it down to the point where the compactor doesn't have enough power to compact it down anymore and it explodes. So they revert back to what they've always known. And what they've always known is to reject and deny and smile. Because if I ignore this, that doesn't mean that it means that it's not there and I'll be fine. And you can be extremely successful and very content in any of the other stages and be bewildered. And be in between men. This does not discriminate. And I don't think it's by accident that after reviewing the State of American Men 2023 study, we see that different generations that are at different age points of their life are really struggling with this notion. Okay? So let's continue to keep going. So to follow up on my previous statement, why do we not have any zones when you're an in-between men in stage one? Well, I think it's pretty simple. It's just easier to do it that way. What may be different, what may be different for any men and any stage is that depending on the individual, they may have had times throughout their different stages and even growing up where they've experienced the positive impact of sharing their emotions has had on them. Right? We talked about before about doing the right thing, right? And have come to believe in the various 3 stages of doing the right thing. If they've truly experienced that, like I said to you before, they are fundamentally changed forever. And so being in this stage and being in that spot, they're more likely not going to stay in a rejected and denial mindset. They'll move into the next stage of in between men. And that's what we'll talk about next week. Okay? So at the end of the day, what happens to men in this stage is really twofold. The first one being waking up and accepting the reality that emotional stoicism is not a manly trait. They've accepted that, okay? And then accepting that, they have woken up to the reality that they may have to unbox or work through trauma that they've had in any of the stages, whether it be growing up, whether it be stage 1 or even stage 2 of men. And that acceptance is daunting. It's extremely daunting. Okay. And then also, depending on how they have their relationships with their significant other, if they're positive, they've probably also have had to navigate through some challenging times where they've had to, learn aspects of how to handle emotions that may compel them to want to move into stage 2. But I would say that the majority of men, when they've come to recognize this simple fact, they get it in their mind. They can rationalize it. They can believe it. They can say, yes, I get that. But when it comes to actually doing it, the fear and the notion of unboxing all this stuff is just absolutely paralyzing to them. And they struggle for a long time. This can happen for a long time. This can happen. Men can go through this process for the rest of their life. We have endured, and I'm not suggesting that anyone hasn't endured any other challenges, but men have a uncanny way of accepting and dealing with stress to the point where they're unable to carry it anymore. And they will still refuse to try this. They will still tell themselves, this isn't manly, I'm not going to do it. And so what happens to these men is they end up in what I like to call no man's land. And when they are in no man's land for however long a period of time, they are living with the harsh reality that they have the ability to move forward emotionally, but the fear of doing so is so miserable that they settle for the misery. They settle for the, I'm still going to suck it up and I'm still going to be a tough man and I'm not going to be a pussy dad, I promise. I will fight through this because that's what tough people do. And what I can tell you based on my experience is that is categorically false. It is categorically false. So what I know to also be true based on my experience, that no matter how much help and no matter how much compassion and no matter how much you willingly try to either convince or tell and show and provide examples and research that men should consider a inventory of their emotions, they will not change unless they're ready. And this is where it gets really grim. And I'm not trying to what am I saying? I'm not trying to, I can't even come up with the words. Where this gets really grim is that when men choose not to accept this because they know it's so hard, they reach and have reached a bottom that they are convinced they can't climb out of. And so they revert to doing terrible things, right? Whether it's upon themselves or whether it's projected onto others, it is usually not a very good outcome. And it just breaks my heart that men are so convinced that they shouldn't do this and settle for misery. It just kills me. It just really bothers me. So at this point, I would never tell you what you should or you shouldn't do when it comes to anyone that you may love or a family member. But at this point, if this person is not accepting help anymore, and you can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have gone to the farthest lengths possible to give this person the help you think that they need. If they aren't willing to go forward, then you're wasting time. And you need to reevaluate your circumstances. And no man's land is really no man's land. And what I mean by that is that because I can share with you through my own personal experience that when I have moved into believing the 3-stage process of doing the right thing and reviewing my emotions. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's going to take time. Yes, it's going to be expensive. And you will go through difficult times. That is probably doing that for me, and then I won't get into any more details, has been the most often that I have to apply the strength that I know I have as being a good man to move forward. It's like really the first time I just believed that the pain couldn't get any worse and that it was going to get better. And ultimately, in the next stage that we go over of being truly in between men, we'll talk a little bit about what happens when you reach that stage and why it's so compelling, and then what happens to men. But not many people are doing it. Not many men are doing it. And they're not doing it because they prefer misery. And they've been told that that's what men do. And I'm telling you, that is not what men do, in my opinion. And I'm giving you permission to know in your, if you can, in your heart, that it's not what you're supposed to do. You don't need to be a strong pillar that handles more pain than anyone can imagine. You don't need to do that. You know, we are human beings who make mistakes. We've had plenty of, traumatic situations that were out of our control, that we didn't ask for, that have happened to us, and not talking about them or not talking about them with someone who won't judge us is part of our process. This truly is the necessary suffering that I truly believe Richard Rohr is talking about. And I won't lie to you, it's not easy. But if you can endure the stress and responsibilities that have been bestowed on us by men and fight through this kind of shit. Jesus, imagine what it would be like when you stop fighting. And I implore you to stop fighting. If you haven't heard anything that I've said since I've started this podcast, please hear this. It will be hard. It's not going to be enjoyable. But you have endured so much more pain and suffering that you've passed the test. We already know you can endure the suffering. Why don't you do it for yourself now? Why don't you do it for yourself now? Okay? Because I want you to. Not for me. Not for your wife. Not for your mom. Not for anybody other than you. And I think that's where we're going to end it. So that is stage number 1 of In Between Men. And I admit it's not super glamorous, but I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. And we can talk more about stage number 2 next week. And what happens when you do believe that you are worth it and that you can and will be a better man for trudging along. Trudging along, the definition of trudging is walking with purpose. Okay? So, do me a favor. Do yourself a favor. I need you to do Butch a favor. And I need you to do me a favor. And I want you to, I'm going to ask for some help today. And it's not going to require you to really do anything. But I have a very close personal friend of mine whose mother is really struggling. And she has 5 children, and she's going through some challenging times right now physically. And anyway, if you could have any encouragement, blessings, positive affirmations that you could have for Miss Yolanda, that would be great. And yeah, we're all struggling, man. And so sometimes just thinking about somebody else is all I know I need in order to feel better about where I'm at. So do me a favor, do yourself a favor, do you Miss Yolanda a favor, do Butchie a favor, and do Donald Duck a favor. And just get the fuck out of here. All right? Take care of yourself, gang. And you know what? I'll see you in there. Episode 37 coming at you, coming to you full circle. Hey, so let me give you a practical example of what this feels like when you're ready to stop denying and rejecting the notion. Do you remember growing up watching horror movies? Remember being fucking terrified out of your mind about Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers just showing up or being in the closet? You know what I mean? Like, no matter what you did, no matter how you convinced yourself they were going to be there, and the terror that brought you. And then just one day you wake up and you're like, I'm over that. That's what this is like. It's like growing out of the fear of Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees. That does require a little bit of work. So I hope that makes sense. Check us out on all the places. I'll see you in there. Blueberry Chesterfield, South Korea.